Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going in Raw, the only pro wrestling podcast you need to be listening to right here, youtube.com/Steven Larson, of course, found wherever audio podcasts can be found. We continue on with our look at the Dark Side of the Ring series. We're in season 3. This is the second, I guess it's technically the third episode, is the second topic. Deathmatch wrestler Nick Gage. This is a bit of a departure from the usual Dark Side thing. We talked with Evan a little bit about this during our chat with him, the producer, one of the producers of Dark Side, in terms of, them diving into a subject that is arguably, even at 40 years old, certainly at the peak of his popularity.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's nevertheless, he's packed a lot of life into that 40 years.
Yeah. Dark Side up to date by and large have told stories that have happened years ago. This is kind of their first real deep dive into a topic or a personality or story that's topical, the current.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned, Nick Gage, I would think without a doubt in terms of his popularity at his absolute peak. And while I kind of knew the basic beats of his story, a lot of details I was not aware of. So this was very good in terms of filling in those blanks in terms of the knowledge I had about Nick Gage's career. One question I've always had about those who get into deathmatch wrestling, because especially early on, you're putting your body on the line, in some cases your life on the line, for not a lot of financial reward. We've been to a few death matches just here locally.
Sure.
Can't imagine the participants were getting paid a ton of money.
Nope.
To do that. So, if it's not financial incentive to do this, then what is it essentially? And we kind of got an answer about that, from Nick Gage himself. I'll paraphrase. First, he says, "I'm a little bit crazy in the head. My pain tolerance is really high, but I want to show his world the style is all right and has a fan base." And then John Moxley, who's great in this. Right after telling the story about how Nick Gage cut his head open with the pizza cutter and then swiped it across his mouth, tells that, he doesn't do this. Mox says this about himself. I assume this relates to Nick Gage as well. Doesn't do this for the money. Does this for the feeling.
Yeah.
The feeling of being out there in front of the crowd, the feeling of getting amped up by the crowd, take things to another level. The feeling of after you go through that with somebody else, the ring, having a beer with them backstage. He says, and that's what he thinks keeps Nick Gage coming back.
It's a mix of, I like that you mentioned the last bit. It's a mix of adrenaline junkie, which is a very real thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't explicitly stated, but, and I don't want to get too deep into the idea, but almost like getting a better understanding of humanity, like going through that with somebody. And I don't know if they've ever thought about this on a conscious level, but going through that with somebody is like establishing a connection that you would have with nobody else.
Here, this just popped in my head, and maybe you'll agree with this, maybe not. It's probably, for a lot of people, I like Nick Gage throughout the show was talking about how, for the most part, he knows the limits of things. He talks about when he accidentally cut Arquette, he's like, all right, he's bleeding a little bit, but nothing's pouring out. He'll be fine.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know I don't know how accurate that is, but from his vantage point, it seemed like he'd be all right.
By that time, I would think he would have some decent idea of human anatomy and what's gone too far and what hasn't. Yeah.
But then again, he got like entirely cut under his arm. Is like, take me up, I'm going back out. And then like,
well, that was earlier though. That was much earlier. That was one of those life lessons. Yeah.
Yeah. So perchance this is a situation where I don't want to use the phrase near-death experience lightly.
Sure, yeah.
But you're going out there and the life of another human being, to a certain degree, is in your hands and vice versa.
Yeah, yeah.
There is potentially a bond that is forged in that 10, 12, 15 minutes you're in the ring together. The level of trust you have to place in that other person to go to a certain level but not beyond.
Yeah.
That's got to be something else.
There's something there's something
else.
deep there that I would never want to venture towards personally. I have a bit of a fascination with deathmatch wrestling. It's not always something that, you know, I don't want to sit and have a nice meal and watch deathmatch wrestling. It's a bit off-putting, but I understand it. I get it. And sometimes I will indulge in watching some just because I get the itch sometimes, and it does fascinate me.
Agreed. Although, you know, just watching this, it reminds me of pretty much every time I watch deathmatch wrestling, it's me sitting here trying to avoid a panic attack.
Yeah, right.
Because in every spot, like the spot where Nick Gage got really hurt, where he just gets whipped into the ropes, tumbles into some light tubes and out of the ring. I mean, as he put it, he's like, yeah, it seems basic enough. I just landed wrong.
Yeah.
And he had to get the helicopter out, died on the helicopter.
Yeah.
Only be brought back. Like, even the most seemingly mundane of spots in these matches could lead to a horrible injury. And it's like just a constant state of anxiety.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, to be honest with you, that like more people don't just completely die in wrestling in general. Because here's the thing, like you know this, any spot in any wrestling match can go awry and somebody can die, you know? And it's kind of shocking. I mean, number one, the human body is very resilient. And so maybe it's not shocking that they die more often. It is shocking that there's not more. I mean, we've seen all sorts of, you know, there's all sorts of great compilations of indie wrestling botches gone bad. That one dude who just splattered on the concrete, he was fine. I'm sure he wasn't fine, like but yeah, right. Elbow, I think. Yeah. Like all those things in my mind, I'm like, yeah, you should probably be dead at this point.
He wasn't catastrophically injured.
Right. I've seen, I don't know how many backyard wrestling matches that begin or end with somebody getting hit by a car. Like, you know, and then they just get up and they probably feel like crap the next day, or they might have a busted ankle or something, but by and large, they're fine. No, this was the thing that I liked so much about this, and it's something that I look forward to. It's something that I look for in every episode of Dark Side, especially after having talked to the guys a couple times and understanding like where they're coming from is the idea. I love that the idea behind this was basically they're looking at the humanity behind a person where on the surface you might not see a lot of it. You know, it's like, what do we know about him? He's a deathmatch guy who robbed a bank and did time. And yet he has this insane connection with the crowd. Nick Gage is a singular figure. He is, he does remind me in many ways and in many ways not, of New Jack. With Nick Gage, there is much more of a vulnerability that he has no problem exposing, especially in this. That is very interesting. With New Jack, there is much more of a smoke screen there, of a force field there, of how much, I mean, even in that episode, all right, by the end, he's talking about, you know, whatever the last scene of his movie would be, you know, just him knee deep in cocaine. And it's like, okay, you're clowning around or you're not, but who the hell are you really? And we never really get that answer in the New Jack one. I think
with the New Jack one, you have the character of New Jack, and you have where there's seemingly a lot of crossover between the character of New Jack and I forgot what New Jack's name is. Is it Jerome Young? Is that
I believe so. Yeah.
So, you know, I think there's some haziness in terms of where the delineation between New Jack and Jerome Young is, where I feel like Nick Gage is a situation where this is just him. Yeah. His character's turned up. Yeah. But this is just him.
And that's why I think with New Jack, I feel like the appeal, the audience connection with New Jack on one degree was personal. On another degree, it was, oh, this guy he does crazy stuff for our entertainment. With Nick Gage, it does feel like, hey, I feel this guy. You know, he seems to really be into community building. You know, MDK. Yeah. I mean, granted, stands for Murder, Death, Kill, but he seems to really be into his community. Like, he was really touched when he was doing his bid, his time, and he didn't realize just how much people adored him, and they sent him all sorts of fan mail. But what I liked about this was finding the humanity in a horror movie villain. Well, not villain, but a walking horror movie, if you will. You know what I mean? I think the analogy is made early on that death matches are basically, you know, wrestling's version of horror movies. You know, it just completely, it's how far can you take a thing without actually dying? And it's funny because I do appreciate that they really dispense with the brutality early on. Like in the first quarter hour, in the first 15 minutes, it is difficult to watch because they go full bore with, this is deathmatch wrestling, this is CZW, this is GCW, this is the Tournament of Death, and this is, and it's just cut after cut after cut. Yeah. It's a montage of just brutality.
I mean, you get the I believe it's Nick Mondo does the spot off the U-Haul truck through the glass tables. You do one of the spots, I don't remember who the participants are per se, but off a building again. Through some contraption set up in the truck. I know Zandig did a couple of those.
Wasn't that Janela?
I know Zandig and Janela did one of those.
Zandig and Janela, yeah.
I don't know if this was that one that was shown.
I think they did show that.
And then all sorts of light tubes, fire, panes of glass, thumbtacks. You get there's a couple shots of Necro Butcher in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny because the Vice doc on the Tournament of Death, because it is, which again did a really fantastic job of showing the actual people behind the wrestlers, like the wrestlers as people, as humans, and what happens before and after. It did such a great job sort of telling that story in a very methodical pace where you're not inundated. Like this was the beginning of this episode was a supercut to sort of say, hey, this is the world we're throwing you into. And we're going to throw you into it, in over your head.
You're going to the deep end. Yes.
Right. So that you get over that, and then you can let the character come out of that, which, so they got to the where he died part pretty early in the show. They go over his, his childhood. He was very close with his mom. They do an excellent job humanizing him off the bat. Very close with his mom. He's been with his girlfriend for decades now.
20 years, I think. Yeah.
Right. And he lost his mom to cancer. Him and his brother came up and doing backyard stuff. And then
his dad was a huge wrestling fan, would just have it on. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it is interesting from the get. And so you see him fleshed out quite a bit. And it all leads up to probably the worst and most comedic bank robbery I've ever seen in my life. And it was like, I knew that Lacey would not be into the deathmatch stuff, but for that moment, I was like, once Mox mentioned the mask stuff and he had the greatest punchline, I paused it and rewound. I was like, Lacey, you got to watch this because it's great. It's so funny. But yeah, they lead up to, he was really down on his luck. He was popping a lot of pills, and
so at that point he had moved on to heroin, I believe.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because getting OxyContin was too expensive.
It was too expensive. Yeah. So he moved on to the hard stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was hard for money. They just sort of stopped caring about paying bills, and he ended up sleeping on the floor of Brett Lauderdale, the owner of GCW.
He broke into Brett Lauderdale's
He broke
house.
in. Sorry, I should have preceded it by saying he broke in. Knocked out, and Brett Lauderdale comes home and he's sleeping on their floor, and Nick Gage, he's like, fucking they kicked me out. It's negative 10 degrees outside. So I'm sitting there thinking, I got to get some money. I go up to a bank and I'm like, pussy out. And I'm like sitting there like, oh God, fuck, I can't believe you just pussied out. So I find another bank. He goes in there, no mask on this dude was up in the camera like this. You just see his dumb face. Oh man, it was hilarious. He has a one of those notes like you see in a movie, I got a gun, give me all your money, hurry up. I had to lose my temper a little bit. And then he leaves, but it's like, and then Mox takes over and says, yeah, I get a call. Hey, look your email. And there is just Nick Gage, clear as fucking day, in the bank, and he's robbing a bank.
Well, the punchline was before he comes out for a match, he has a handkerchief over his face like he's trying to rob a train.
Yeah.
And here he's actually doing a robbery, doesn't cover his face.
Oh, God. It was his delivery on that was so perfect. It was so great. And it was really great having, another benefit of having Mox out of the WWE because, he goes back with Nick Gage quite a bit, like you mentioned earlier with the pizza cutter. Mox was able to tell his story of the first time he encountered Nick Gage in CZW. And so yeah, it it was pretty interesting stuff. And then he landed in prison. I was actually pretty surprised. I mean, for pulling off, I mean, I guess, is it considered armed robbery? Did he actually have a gun with him?
That wasn't established. He just wrote a note that said he did. So I don't know if the threat of a weapon is enough to be charged with armed robbery or not.
I would maybe assume so. I don't know. Every state is weird.
Yeah, every state is different. What before he went to jail? This was interesting. So, his girlfriend found out about the robbery through the newspaper, and he said, "Well, I got to get out here and spend this money." So he and his girlfriend went to Atlantic City to the casino, started gambling.
Even before
living it up for a week.
Even before that, though, the great thing is he comes back to Brett Lauderdale's house, and he like throws the money down. And he says, "I just robbed a drug dealer," and Brett Lauderdale's smart enough to be like, "Okay, these are pristine dollar bills. Did you just rob a bank?"
Yeah. And so he goes to Atlantic City, and Brett Lauderdale's like, I'm not gonna snitch on him. I'm not gonna turn him in, but what I'll do is I'll call him every day and say, "Are you gonna turn yourself in today?" And I guess Nick Gage would be like, "I know I'm going to jail.
Yeah.
But I'm not ready yet."
Yeah.
So apparently Brett Lauderdale would call him every day. All right, how you doing? You doing good? You ready to turn yourself in yet? And then I guess after 8 or 9 days, Brett called. Nick says, "All right, I'm ready." So Brett Lauderdale drove to Atlantic City, picked him up, bought him some Burger King, his favorite meal of Burger King. And Nick says he drank a 40, smoked a bowl, and turned himself in, and ended up getting sent to jail. The sentence for 5 years, served about 4.5 of those.
Yeah.
And he said, when he was in jail, he got a bunch of fan mail, and it was then that he realized how much people appreciated his work and loved him. And it motivated him to keep going. He got in the best shape of his life, he said. And he said, "I want to get out of here and put deathmatch wrestling back on the map."
Yeah. And in the meantime, while he was there, I think it was 2015, Brett Lauderdale had purchased what was formerly Jersey Championship Wrestling and turned into Game Changer Wrestling. He had the Nick Gage Invitational Deathmatch Tournament. And then he gets a call that Nick got caught up again. He fell into his bad habits, and he was
tried
busted.
To take a pee test.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the device that he was talking about? Did you understand that part?
I'm not familiar with it. Gosh, I thought there was.
Because he was, the producers give Brett Lauderdale Nick Gage's side of it, which was, "I just got busted for a bad urine test."
Yeah.
And then Brett says, "Well, that was part of it."
Yeah.
But he also might have been using some other device.
Like,
I'm sure chat might light us up. It might be out there.
Yeah, this is like a vague recollection. I thought a football player got busted for something like that too. For some sort of device. I don't know what it is, but I could be completely off base with that.
Okay. Because they even did
the thought, the memory is stuck in my head, but beyond just a vague memory of it, I don't remember details.
Was it related to faking a drug test? Okay. Because they did the recreation thing where something was being taken off of his person, and I couldn't, I am an innocent child when it comes to drug tests, and I've not been in that world. I've taken one. Go ahead.
So this is back in 2005. So there was a player who was caught with something called the Whizzinator.
Okay.
So I think it's a fake front area.
Oh wow.
And with the bladder, so I think you can put whatever you want in the bladder and then urinate, and then it's it's not your pee.
Okay, all right, that sounds okay.
So this is back in 2005.
Okay, so it was like
my memory didn't fail me completely there.
It's like okay, all right. So it was just sort of like a goofy.
It's like a prosthetic I think you put on.
Okay.
And so if you have to actually do a urine test in front of somebody to ascertain that you're not faking
the details of which are probably a bit goofy and sort of irrelevant to it, he got busted for faking his pee. That's funny because Brett's reaction was, "Well, that was part of it." Yeah, he was really good in this, by the way.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah. So that sort of pisses off Brett Lauderdale because he put together this invitational, and he ends up doing. What was it like? 2 more years or something?
2 more years. So it's about 7 years in total.
Oh my God, what a waste!
6.5, 7 years,
What a
pretty
waste.
much. So then, yeah, in 2017, he's released again.
Meanwhile, Game Changer really blew up. Like they took that in 2015 when they purchased it, and I remember hearing about the first Joey Janela Spring Break. That's when GCW really sort of sprung to mind, and really that's when I found out about Joey Janela. I was like, who is this, and why does he get his own Spring Break? That sounds cool. And you start learning about that stuff, and my God, I mean, they are sort of become a cornerstone of WrestleMania weeks these days on the indie circuit. That's the
whole collective thing where they have
collective blood sport, all that.
Tons of shows they put on during the course of the weekend. Yeah. So at this point, Brett Lauderdale gives him another chance. He says, he more or less says, I feel like this time, essentially Nick was ready. And they kind of fast forward then to his match against David Arquette.
Yeah. Which Big Jeff was there for.
Oh,
he was at that match. Yeah. I think he texted me like later on, was like, man, I think I might've seen David Arquette die. Because
so we've seen this from, and granted, Arquette's interviewed for this, but we've seen Arquette talk about this in his documentary, You Can't Kill David Arquette,
which we were in as well. Yes.
Yeah, briefly. So we get Nick Gage's perspective on the whole thing here as well. Essentially, Arquette took the match. Well, first, someone asked him, I think it was Brett Lauderdale, says, hey, you want to wrestle Nick Gage? And Arquette's like, yeah, sure. And he started researching what Nick Gage did in the ring. And he was like, all right, well, I'll do a death match. I'll go out there, because Arquette's been ridiculed since he won the WCW title.
Yeah.
And he the whole kind of thing about him getting back into wrestling was to prove to wrestling fans that he is one of them. He is a wrestler. He is a wrestling fan.
He didn't trying
win that title to disrespect the business.
He was trying to, his love for the business, unfortunately, was, because of the WCW stuff, he became an enemy in many wrestling fans' eyes for simply taking up an opportunity when it was presented to him. And he's got a lot of love for the business, but that love was sort of, peed all over because of what happened, and he wanted to go out. And so he did like a bit of a tour where I think RJ City trained him up quite a bit. I think he was one of the main guys that trained him.
In the documentary, as it's presented there, he goes he trains up in Mexico.
Okay, he goes all over the place.
He did some stuff with RJ City.
I just fast forwarded to our part.
And then tagged with him for a while, too.
Yeah. Because, I'd basically known a lot of that story, so I didn't need to get in the details of it. But I hear it's a great documentary.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's really good. Yeah. So Nick Gage talks about how David Arquette took himself and Brett Lauderdale to dinner at
Frank and Musso.
Musso and Frank.
Musso and Frank's. Yeah, I used to live right around the corner from that place.
Oh, okay. In L.A. And Gage is telling him, hey, this is real. The glass is real. You're gonna bleed. And Arquette was like, yeah, I was into it. I just told Gage, I'm an actor. Just don't cut me.
Yeah.
Just don't cut me.
Yeah.
And Gage was like, all right, I'm going to be me. This is what I do. So just be ready for it.
It seemed to be, I'm not even going to say a lack of communication, because it really does feel like they tried to explain to David Arquette, this is the deal. This is what it is. And Arquette was like, okay, cool. Because even Arquette says, until you get into one, you really don't know what to expect. You don't really, it's glass, and I know it's dangerous. Dude, no, you really needed to pay it. Like, I don't know. I get the idea of wanting to establish your bona fides and your credentials, but I don't know. I could look at that any CZW match and be like, no, not really. No. Not gonna know.
So like Arquette admits he was in over his head. Shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Yeah.
So they go over the spot, the how things kind of spiraled out of control. So Gage takes his pizza cutter to Arquette, and Arquette says, I told him not to cut me. I feel like Gage says, oh, this pizza cutter, you won't feel a thing. And Arquette says, I feel like my forehead is getting sliced off. And he's like, at this point, I don't feel the trust that's necessary for a wrestling match.
Yeah.
And so at one point, Gage takes a piece of light tube, smashes it over Arquette's head, and this is when Arquette pretty much reaches back behind him and does a double leg takedown of Gage. In the process, Gage is trying to stab him in the head with the light.
Yeah,
tube
that's when.
and
Yeah, he does that,
accidentally-
and then it's sort of simultaneous. Like Gage is trying to shank his head with the light tube, and while Arquette's like, no. And then you can see him like go down and like put his hand on his neck, and Gage is like, I don't know what he says. Probably I'm gonna fuck you up if you do this, or let's just finish the match or something like that. But like the really disconcerting thing though is the reaction of the crowd in the moment. I should have asked Jeff about this. The reaction of the crowd, those kind of shows, it's with a savvier crowd. It's like if you're going to a Nick Gage match, it's like, okay, you're going to be sort of savvy to the whole thing. And when you see somebody bleeding as much as Arquette was, that crowd was like,
it's quiet.
It is awkwardly quiet. It's like, it's like somebody just walked into a party that everybody hates. It's like, oh God, what is happening? Nobody's chanting, nobody's cheering. They're just seeing, it's just everybody's there. A couple of dudes and one guy is bleeding really bad. And everybody is thinking he's going to die if he doesn't get that taken care of now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Gage accidentally stabs Arquette in the neck or cuts him. And that's when Gage says, I took a look at it. Blood wasn't shooting out. It was bleeding, but it looked like a hole. He'll be fine. Let's finish the match. Mm-hmm. Arquette, I think, leaves at first, then goes back to the ring.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Throws a chair at Gage. And Gage does a judo throw, pins him, and tells him to stay down.
Yeah.
To finish the match, and then Arquette gets in the car. I think Luke Perry drives him to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From my memory serves from Arquette's documentary.
Mm-hmm. Well, he even mentioned that too. Nick Gage mentioned that. He said he got in Luke Perry's car. He was a crybaby about it. Then you see some TMZ footage the next day that Arquette talks about, and they're like,
you can tell he's still upset about it.
How do you feel? Interesting. That's his response. He was still pretty bent about it. And then from that, obviously that was. I know we had heard about Nick Gage before that. But that really did, it's like, oh, why was Arquette in there with that guy? And then you just start paying attention a bit more. And his profile just sort of naturally rose even from there. And that was just only a couple of years ago. And so, especially commensurate also with GCW being on the rise, you hear more about Nick Gage, guys like Ricky Shane Page. So you hear about all those guys a bit more. And so his reputation starts to grow, and then they sort of bring it back down because we find out that his brother commits suicide by jumping off a bridge after being chased by cops for stealing a car.
Yeah, and I think it's Brett Lauderdale talks about how kind of as Nick Gage is in the process trying to get his life back together, following I believe his second release from prison, kind of parallel to that, his brother's life is kind of falling apart, having trouble at his home, some potentially some substance abuse issues, and I guess he steals a car. Yeah, is pursued by the police, and he stops on a bridge and jumps off.
But evidently that was his plan in the first place, because he did leave a note behind that said "I'm sorry," which is absolutely tragic. And like they were talking about, he was the brother who had his shit together, and Nick was the guy who was doing a bid, and his family had left him substance abuse, like you said, and then this is how it ended up leaving. And he said, the bridge that he jumped off of is literally behind my house within sight. And so whenever I go back there, I say a little prayer and give a shout out to him. But yeah, it seemed like throughout the course of the document, like there was one bit where Gage wasn't in a good place, had a match with his brother, and he was like, yeah, I was just out of it. And his brother sort of like towards the beginning of the match just gave him his finish and held him down and pinned him. And, so they didn't seem to have a great relationship anyways over the years.
No, not necessarily. To kind of close, they asked Brett Lauderdale about redemption when it comes to Nick Gage. And Lauderdale, he didn't sugarcoat it. He says, for an addict, it's a day-by-day process. He and Nick seemed pretty close.
Yeah.
And it was kind of neat to see Brett Lauderdale give a pretty honest assessment, kind of across the board, of Nick Gage. Yeah. Like I didn't feel like he handled any part of the story with kid gloves whatsoever. He gave,
and he called it straight too. One reason that it's apropos that they're doing it now was because of something that both Lauderdale and Nick Gage talk about, and that's his mortality. And Lauderdale says, like any addict, every day is a battle. You're always fighting to make sure that you're going to stay alive and you're going to be straight. And so he says his redemption will be written in the end. If he's able to keep it together, then he'll have it. If he's not, he won't. And Gage said the same thing. He basically said, I'm not planning on being around, till I'm old. I'm probably going to go sooner than later. Now, the irony is he'll probably end up going when he's like 90 years old or something.
Yes.
That's usually, if this dude hasn't, and now, we sort of glossed over it, but that footage of him bleeding out was
against
brutal.
Thumbtack Jack,
Brutal. There was a ton of blood, and he was, like you said, he was sitting there. Oh, I want to get me back in there. Take me up. Can you at least walk me out there and make it look like I tried to get back in? No, dude. Meanwhile, this poor nurse is getting every towel available.
We can't get the ambulance here. We got to call in the helicopter.
Yeah, that's how bad it is. Oh, yeah, that's when he said, yeah, the camera guys immediately knew. It just buckets were pouring. Oh, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to Nick Gage talking about, I'm probably going to be, but yeah, what I was saying was, he's lived through this much. It's kind of like New Jack. It's good. At this point, you kind of know you are dealing with some sort of mutant healing ability or toughness anyways, because man, y'all get put down and you keep on coming back. Yeah.
So to kind of close things, they go back to Mox, talks about how Nick Gage is going to keep going. And he says, Nick Gage has the number one talent you need. You don't need huge muscles. You need the ability to connect. And he said, Vince McMahon would kill to have one person with the kind of connection Nick has with his fans.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's a double-edged sword. It's the problem with that is with Vince McMahon, they're the establishment. So once you go there, it's is it can you make that kind of really intimate connection with fans the way Nick Gage does? Now, some wrestlers have been able to, but I'm not going to say by any means it's easy at all in the independent circuit. It's not easy at all for anybody to do that. But yeah, Nick Gage in the WWE is probably a non-starter because the thing that is Nick Gage is so anti-WWE, that philosophy of corporate wrestling, basically. But the idea is totally sound. What you want is somebody who can connect with fans. And Nick Gage definitely has done that, and he seems very grateful for the community that has built around him, via deathmatch wrestling.
Yeah.
So yeah, solid episode. And I think next week is Collision with Korea, right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.